And two dimension elastic collision, the collision between two bodies is said to be elastic if there is no loss of kinetic energy and the total momentum of the system remains conserved. That is conservation of kinetic energy as well as CLM. This is basically this is the CLM part. Sorry, this is the CLM part. Now, that means total momentum is conserved, total kinetic energy is conserved, total mechanical energy is conserved, forces are conservative. This you have already read. No, there is no mechanical energy is not converted to heat, light, and sound if read in smaller classes, class 9th or 10th, like that. Inelastic collision, the collision in two bodies said to be inelastic if there is a momentum conservation, but kinetic energy is not conserved yet. Do not use this conservation of kinetic energy in this case. You have to use coefficient of restitution in that case, do problems and let you make you understand about this. The total momentum is conserved. The kinetic energy is not conserved. The total energy is conserved. Forces involved during collision are non-conservative. A part of the mechanical energy is converted into heat, light, and sound. Now the next part is coefficient of restitution. It is the relative velocity of separation with the relative velocity of approach. That is, you can see if it is between it is 0, then it is perfectly elastic, equal to 1, perfectly inelastic, between somewhat elastic, somewhat inelastic, then E is in between 0 and 1. V1 here, V1 means velocity of the final velocity of the first body. V2 means final velocity of the second body. U2 means initial velocity of the second body, and U1 means initial velocity of the first body. This is what it is all about. Now you have certain questions. The first question is, let me now, yes, 1 kg mass is on the floor connected to a 2 kg mass by a string. You can read the problem, and passing over a pulley, obtain the speed of mass when the 2 kg mass just touches the floor. Establish that the gain in kinetic energy system equals the loss in potential energy. Initially the 2 kg mass is at a height of 3 meters above the ground. Now 20% of the linear momentum is increased. What will be the percentage increase in kinetic energy? The second question. A shot is traveling at a speed of at a rate of speed of at a rate whatever you say 10 meters per second, because this is meters per second, and that is speed of, and just is able to pierce a plank of 4 centimeter thick. What velocity is just required to pierce a plank of 9 centimeter thick? A pump on the ground of a building can pump water to fill a tank of volume 30 meter cube in 15 minutes. If the tank is 40 meters above the ground and the efficiency of the pump is 30%, efficiency means output power by input power into 100%. That gives you efficiency percent. How much electric power is consumed? Now in this, a 60 kg man climbs staircase carrying a load of 20 kg. He has to climb 20 steps, and each step is a 0.2 meter high. Then it takes the man 10 seconds to find his power. A bullet is fired 60 bullets per minute from with a velocity of 700 meter, and each bullet has a mass of this. Find the power developed by the gun. A ball of mass 10 and 20 kg are moving with 20 meter per second and 10 meter. That means a 10 kg ball has 20 meter per second and a 20 kg ball has a 10 meter per second velocity. What are the velocity after collision? This is going to become U1. This is going to become U2. Whatever you want to say, you can interchange the way you want. To stimulate a car accident, auto manufacturers study the collision of the moving car with mounted spring of different spring constant. Consider a typical stimulation with a car of mass 1000 kg moving with a speed of 18 km per hour on a smooth road colliding with a horizontally mounted spring of spring constant 6.25 into 10 to the power of 3 Newton per meter. What is the maximum compression of the spring? And the next is a very good question. This is also force is given in vector form, and displacement has been given in vector form. You need to get the work done. Work done is F dot S dot product, and then you have a body of mass 2 kg initially at rest under the action of applied force of 7 Newton and a kinetic energy of 0.1. Compute the work done by applied friction, net force, kinetic energy of the body. And there is this one, the last question. A balloon of mass m is rising up with an acceleration a. This acceleration a show that the fraction of the weight of the balloon that must be detached in order to double its acceleration is the mass that you need to throw out is this. You need to show this, assuming of the thrust of the air to remain the same. Now we are going to understand that is called collision on first in one dimension, and then we'll do collision in second dimension, 2 dimensions I mean to say. Now let's do it. Now let's start with this collision in one dimension. Let us start collision in one dimension. In one dimension. Now first you understand this one. There is a mass m1. This is having an initial velocity u1 vector. This is a mass m2 having an initial velocity u2 vector. They are having some collision here. And then after that, m1 is having a final velocity v1 vector and m2 is having a final velocity v2 vector. Once and for all I'm writing it, but you need to write in every problem, in every derivation, that m1 is mass of first body, m1 is the mass of the first body, m2 is the mass of the second body, then v1, let me write, v1 is the velocity of the first body, final velocity, rather I should write final velocity. I should write final velocity of first body, that is m1, I mean to say v1 vector, v2 vector. Let me take some space. Wait. Yes, let me write this again. This is v2 vector. This is v2 vector. This is the final velocity. Final velocity. You need to write in every problem what your symbols mean. This is very, very important. Of second body, that is m2. Then u1 is the initial velocity of first body, or velocity first body. u2 initial velocity of second body. Now see, what I am assuming is that they are all going one after the other. That means they are going in this direction. This is also going in this direction. This is also going in this direction. It is coming from behind and hitting m2. You can take it otherwise, then you have to change the vector sign. That's all. Wait. While doing the problem, I give you a problem, there we will do it. See, now since there are no external forces, there is a conservation of linear momentum. This is very, very important line to write. CLM, by CLM. You must write m1 u1 vector, m2 u2 vector is equal to m1 v1 vector plus m2 v2 vector. Out of this, now you have, write u1 vector is u1 I cap, comma u2 vector is u2 I cap. Suppose it is opposite now, then you put a minus sign here. Suppose u2 is opposite, put a minus sign. That's all. Nothing else you need to do. We'll do this in the problem, not now. Now you have your v1 is actually equal to v1 without loss of generality. We are assuming they are going in the same direction. v1 I cap and v2 e vector is equal to v2 I cap. Now you put and remove all the I caps, then you will have the scalar equation m1 u1. पहले आपको देखना है कि CLM होल्ड कर रहा है क्योंकि एक्सटर्नल फोर्सेस अप्लाइड नहीं हो रहा है. तो m1 u1 इनिशियल है, u2 इनिशियल है m2 का, v1 फाइनल वेलोसिटी m1 का, v2 है फाइनल वेलोसिटी. मैंने ये मान लिया है कि सारे एक ही डायरेक्शन पे जा रहे हैं. फॉर द डेरिवेशन पर्पस आप ऐसे मान सकते हैं. नहीं तो आपको जब जैसे वो क्वेश्चन है कि ऊपर है, वहां पे हम यहाँ पे क्या कर देंगे, माइनस साइन लगा देंगे. नथिंग एल्स विल चेंज, और कोई चेंज नहीं होगा. अभी तो हम ऐसे डेरिवेशन नहीं सिर्फ करेंगे. अब मैं इस वेक्टर इक्वेशन को स्केलर इक्वेशन में कन्वर्ट कर रहा हूँ. कैसे? सब जगह पे इनकी वैल्यूज, u1 वेक्टर की वैल्यू, u2 वेक्टर की वैल्यू, v1 वेक्टर की वैल्यू और v2 वेक्टर की वैल्यू पुट कर रहा हूँ. आई एम सब्स्टिट्यूटिंग the values of the vector u1, u2, v1, v2. So now all the I caps will be removed and I'll have सारे I cap remove हो जाएंगे और मुझे मिलेगा m1 u1 m2 u2 is equal to m1 v1. ये कोई जबरदस्ती नहीं है सबको I cap प्लस I प्लस करना. ये ऑपोजिट भी हो सकता है, तब माइनस लेंगे. मैंने अभी बोला है ना प्रॉब्लम के लिए विदाउट लॉस ऑफ जनरलिटी. मैंने एक डेरिवेशन निकालने के लिए कर रहे हैं हम लोग. यू आर जस्ट डूइंग इट टू फाइंड आउट द डेरिवेशन. यू कैन चेंज अकॉर्डिंग टू द प्रॉब्लम. They can be plus or minus sign. This can be plus minus, or this can be plus minus, or this can be depending upon the situation. So right now we are just doing for the sake of derivation of the problem. And when we will do a problem, we'll come to know how to do this. Now see, m1 v1 m2 v2. Now do one thing, bring all the m1s on one side and take all the m2s on this side. That means m1 you take common, u1 minus v1. This has come in this direction. Now this will go in that direction. So take m2 common and you will have v2 minus u2। M1 V1 को इधर इस तरफ लेके आए लेफ्ट साइड पे, M2 U2 को राइट साइड पे लेके जाए, कॉमन ले ले M1 और M2, टेक द कॉमन M1 and M2, this is your first equation. Now since this is an elastic collision in one dimension and we are taking, wait a minute, I didn't think I wrote it, we are taking elastic collision in the first case, wait a minute, yes, let me write down, we are taking the elastic, rest all will remain same, no problem. Basically, I'm doing elastic collision. Let me write here in the bracket that I'm doing elastic collision right now. Let me write here elastic collision. Elastic collision we are talking about. Elastic collision. Elastic collision. I'm talking about elastic collision. Now, this is all that we are doing is of elastic collision. Wait a minute. Now, see, yes, here. Now you will use the conservation of kinetic energy because this is elastic collision. Conservation of kinetic energy. That means half, just a minute, half this is your half m1 u1 square plus half m2 u2 square is equal to half m1 v1 square plus half m2 v2 square. So just cut half, half, half on all sides. Bring this m1 in this side and take the m2 on this side. Now you have m1 u1 square minus v1 square common. You take an m1 out. I've taken the m1 out common and I brought this there. Now m2 will be taken out here and this will be v2 square minus u2 square. Now a square minus b square is a plus b and a minus b. u1 plus v1 and u1 minus v1. This is first m2. You have v2 plus u2 and you have v2 minus u2. This is equation number 2. Divide 2 by 1. Divide this equation by this equation. So m1 and they will cancel out. They will just cancel out. They will just cancel out. What you are left with, let me take a little more space. Yes, you are now left with u1 v1 divide, let me write divide equation 2 by equation 1. Once you divide, you are left with, let me take it a little down. Yes, here it is. u1 plus v1 is equal to v2 plus u2. That's all. You are left with this equation now. Once you are left with this equation, do one thing. You can write down v2. So from here, this is equation number 3, and from here v2 is equal to u1 plus v1 minus u2. Now you will do one thing. You will substitute uh, in the main equation I'm talking about this equation. You will substitute in this equation. Wait, here you will substitute in this equation. Let us consider this equation as a. Let me copy this expression and bring it down. Now let me, and here we have, wait a minute, this equation I'm talking about. That equation, let me rewrite it. It has become bit, yes, wait a minute. Here we have m1 u1 plus m2 u2, and this is, I'll put this v2 in this place. Now see what happens. m1 u1 plus m2 u2 equal to m1 v1 plus m2. Now you have u1 plus v1 minus u2. Open up this bracket. m1 u1 m2 u2 is equal to m1 v1 plus m2 u1 plus m2 v1 minus m2 u2. You have this. Now see, anything cancels out? Nothing cancels out. I have to do one thing. I have to find v1. Now u1 I know. See what I know. I know m1. I know u1. I know m2. I know u2. I know m1. I don't know this. I do not know this. I know this. I know u1. I know this. I don't know v1. Wait a minute. Let me. I don't know v1. I don't know v1. So I don't know this. I know this also because they are initial and initial velocities of the two body. Now I'll do is that I'll collect the v1s in one side and I'll put all the u's and u1s and u2 on the other side. So now you see what I'll do is that m1 u1, and do you have anything here? M2 u2. See, you will now have, see, m1 you have this equation and you have this equation, Now what you do is that m1 minus m2 u1. I brought this equation this side. This is done. Now take this equation and take this equation. You have when this comes here, it adds up with this. It becomes 2m2 u2. क्या है कि यहाँ पे m1 u1 है और यहाँ पे है m2 u2. इस इक्वेशन को इधर लेके आते हैं और हम लोग u1 को कॉमन लेते हैं, तो आई विल गेट m1 minus m2. See, this equation is m1 u1, this is m2 u2. When I bring m2 u2 on this side, on the left side, I'll get m1 minus m2 u1. And ये नेगेटिव क्वांटिटी था, जब ये उधर जाएगा तो पॉजिटिव हो जाएगा. दिस वाज द नेगेटिव क्वांटिटी, व्हेन दिस विल गो देयर इट विल बिकम पॉजिटिव क्वांटिटी, एंड दिस विल बी m1 m2 v1. So v1 is equal to, divide, very simple, m1 minus m2 u1 and 2m2 u2 by m1 plus m2. This is your first very important formula. This is your first very important formula. Now do one thing. Let us consider this as equation, let's say A. You write whatever you want to write. Equation A. Put this equation A in this place. You put this equation here. You put this equation in this place. In place of V1, you put it and you get V. Sorry. In place of this is your equation. In place of V1, you put that equation A and you will get V2. See how? Let's see how. Now let me keep this equation in front of me. Yes. Now you have what you have. You have V2 is equal to u1 plus v1 minus u2. Just put the value of v1. So do one thing. u1 minus u1 you keep as it is right here. v1 के जगह पे इस वाली इक्वेशन की वैल्यू पुट करनी है. That is m1 minus m2 u1 plus 2m2 u2 upon m1 plus m2 up minus u2. This only in this place I put this whole equation. Now take LCM. V2 equal to m1 plus m2 u2. Now open up everything. Now you have m1 minus m2 u1. Now you have plus 2m2 u2 minus m1 plus m2 u2. This LCM has been taken and this is your m1 plus m2. Now you have to cancel the parts which are possible, and then we'll have the final expression. See, open up the bracket. V2, see, m1 u1 plus m2 u2 plus m1 u1 minus m2 u2 plus 2 m2 u2 minus m1 u2 minus m2 u2. Now you have m1 plus m2. Now see, m2 u2 and m2 u2 cancels out. Now see, this point and this point becomes 2. So now we will drag it a little down. I'll take a little more page. Now see here. Now V2 is coming out to be, see, V2 is now coming out to be your, this is coming out to be 2m1 u1. Now this is m2 u2 minus, this is plus 2m2. This will become plus m2 u2 and this is a minus m2 u2. So now plus m2 minus m1 u2. ये minus sign है, ये plus sign है, and this is plus and minus will become 2m2 minus m1, m2 will become plus m2, and this is minus m1. So upon m1 plus m2. Now this is what you will get. This is your next very, very important equation, that is called the B equation. The B equation. Now the point is that, now why I use this vector signs. Now suppose they want in vector form. What you do, you first get this V2. अगर वो वेक्टर फॉर्म में मांगते, पहले ये V2 निकालो, और मतलब V2 निकालने का मतलब U1 भी निकलेगा, ये u1 या v1 भी निकलेगा, सॉरी ये v1 भी निकल जाएगा। अब इनकी वैल्यू उठा के इस यू पिक अप दोस टू वैल्यूज एंड जस्ट प्लेस इट हियर इन प्लेस ऑफ दिस इज u1, जस्ट अ मिनट, this is u1, this is 1, this is 1, this is 2, this is 2, and this is 1. Place here the value of v1 and place here the value of v2. You will get everything in vector form. You will get it in vector form. That's all. Now this was done. Now we will do certain parts in this. Some cases rather. Some parts I mean to say some cases with these two equation. Equation number. Let us rewrite these equations, and then we will do. Let me find this a equation. Yes. Let me try to copy this expression. Let me try to copy this expression. Yes. Let me copy it. One. Now I will copy these two expressions here. This expression here. So we have got this expression somewhat here. Yes, let me keep it here. Yes. Now nothing much has changed. Only that the now what I can do, I can remove these two lines. We have this equation, this. So now we will take care of these two equations. हमको अब ये दो इक्वेशन से काम करना है, एक दो किसी को भी। Now the cases are, तीन केस हम करेंगे, the three cases. पहला केस, when both masses are same. Case number one, both masses are same. m1 equal to m2 equal to m. That means जब दोनों मास बराबर है and equal to m है, तो ये वाला पोर्शन जीरो हो जाएगा, यहाँ पे ये वाला पोर्शन जीरो हो जाएगा. That means v2 would be 2m u1 upon 2m, and this will be u1. This will be u1, and when both masses are same, so v2 is equal to v2 will be equal to u1. Now, and v1 will be equal to this will become 0. ये 0 हो जाएगा दोनों बराबर होने के कारण, और this will become 2m u2 upon 2m. They'll cancel out each other, and this will become u2. That means v1 will go with velocity of the second body. The first ball, the velocities will interchange. Here the velocities are interchanging. Velocity interchange. This is happening in this case. In the second case, let us rub these lines. Just a minute. In the second case, case number 2, in the second case, we will be doing this. Now we will take the second case, and that is we will take m2. We will take, now wait a minute, we will take case 2. Case 2 will take m1 equal to m2 equal to m, but now we will take the second body is at rest. The u2 is at rest. u2 is 0. u2 is 0. Now if you see this u2 is 0, that means your equations are v1 and so when u2 is 0 and both are same, so v1, let me see what is v1. Let's check what is v1. Let's check. Yes, v1, see u1 v1 will become 0 because u1 is 0, sorry, u2 is 0, and both the masses are same, so this v1 will become 0. v1 will become 0, and v2 will become, see again, let's see again this two expressions with this only. Now v2, these two masses are same, they will become 0, and u2 is at rest, this is also 0, so you will have v2 will become, this will become m, and this will become 2m. This 2m and this 2m, as in the earlier case, will cancel out each other, and we will have v2 equal to what? See here, v2 will be equal to u1. v2 will be equal to u1. So that means let us understand the situation. That means if a body is at rest and one body, both are of same mass, this will come and hit the body. This body will now become at rest. The first body will, and the second body will move away. You have played snooker or billiard. Suppose this was the ball This is the ball. This ball is at rest. This is at rest. This hits it. This now, after hitting, this one comes to rest and this moves. That's the point. मतलब एक बॉडी रेस्ट पे है, दूसरा आके मार रहा है, दोनों का बॉडी मास सेम है, तो जो मार रहा है वो तो खड़ा हो जाएगा, जो जो खड़ा था वो चलने लग जाएगा उसी के वेलोसिटी से. दैट व्हाट इट मींस. नाउ द नेक्स्ट इज, लेट्स रब दिस, ऑल दिस. Now, case number three. Case number three. Wait a minute. Case number three. Case number three is if the case number three is if M1 is very much greater than M2, and suppose U2 is zero. What is happening? Like for example, if like for example, if I take U2, which is that case? Yes, this is the case. Case number three, U2 is zero. Keep U2 is zero and M1 is very much greater than M2. So if U2 is zero, let's see this expression. This is coming out to be, see, if U2 is zero and M1 is greater than M2, I think I wrote M1 greater than M2. Wait a minute, let me check. I wrote it's M1 greater than M2. Exactly. M1 very much greater than M2. For example, a cycle is standing and a truck is coming and hitting the car, the cycle. मान के चलो एक साइकिल खड़ा है और एक ट्रक आके साइकिल को मार रहा है, तो फिर देखो क्या होता है सिचुएशन. M1 की मास तो बहुत ज्यादा है और ये M2 है साइकिल की मास. M1 is the mass of the truck and M1 is the mass of the truck and M2 is the mass of the cycle, and the cycle is at rest. Now see what happens. M1 U1. So your V, what happens? Let's come to that direct equation only. V. What happens to this V1? V1. See, U2 is at rest and M1. So you will have M1 minus M2 upon M1 plus M2. M1 plus M2 U1. You will have this equation because U2 is zero and M1 is greater than M2. Let's do some calculation here for you. Let's do the calculation. M1 very much greater than M2. That means 1, M2 upon M1 is very much smaller than 1. I can take M2 by M1 tending to 0. I can take M2 by M1 tending to 0. So M1 की मास बहुत ज़्यादा है M2 से, तो M2 by M1 बहुत छोटा हो जाएगा 1 से और ऑलमोस्ट 0 के बराबर हो जाएगा. तो मैं यहाँ पे क्या करूँगा? What I'll do here, I'll divide this expression up in the numerator and denominator by M1. Now see what happens. If I do this, what happens? See, V1 is equal to 1 minus M2 by M1 upon 1 plus M2 by M1, and then you have U1. This portion becomes 0, this portion becomes 0, so you have V1. So let's write. So because of this condition, we have V1 equal to U1. V1 equal to U1. Though the cycle will fly up with the velocity of the truck. The cycle will fly up with the velocity of the truck. And what will happen to V2? What will happen? What do you imagine that's going to happen? What is going to happen to V2? Let's see the expression of V2. Let's see the expression of V2 again. Let's see. See here. See, it was we found out V1. We found out V1. We had U2 0. This was 0. And we had this expression. And so V1 now was going with the velocity of U1 because M1 was very much greater than M2. Now let's come to V2. What will happen? See, U1 is there undoubtedly. And this U2 is 0. This part is 0. This part is 0. So what you are left with, only 2M1 and U1. See what happens. Let us come to the point. Yes, here. So now your V2 case. V2 you are left only with, तुम्हारे पास सिर्फ ये रह जाएगा because U2 0 है. So you will get V2 as your U2 is 0. So you will be left with 2M1 U1 upon M2 plus M1. Now divide M2 by M1 all sides. 2 U1 upon 1 plus M1 by M2. You are dividing up and down by M1. Sorry, I think I'm dividing by M1. Just a minute. Let me check once more. which, yes, m1 is greater. No, I'm dividing by m1. That's right. I'm dividing by m1. So what I'm doing is, sorry, this there is a mistake here. We will write it here as m2 by m1. So now this will go to 0. So it will go with 2u1. 2u1. It will go with 2u1. This is the thing. Because of this substitution, 2u1. Exactly. It will go with 2u1. Okay. Now the thing is, the next case, the if that means if this was the case when a heavy body was hitting a light body. If heavy body was hitting a light body, this is the case when heavy body is hitting a light body. मैंने लिया ना साइकिल और उसका एग्जांपल. अच्छा, now we were taking, so now with this expression, now this is the velocity. Now this is the velocity of the cycle. He flies away with 2 times the velocity. I think I said something wrong in the before. And the velocity of the truck remains the same. Let me repeat. मैं फिर से repeat कर रहा हूँ. The velocity of the final velocity of the first body remains as the same as the initial velocity. You can see in this equation. And the velocity of the cycle, which was earlier 0, now becomes 2 times. I said something, I think I made a little bit mistake there. Sorry for that. But here is the correction. That heavy body, this is the final velocity of the heavy body. This is moving with the same. There is no change. A truck will come and hit a cycle, and the truck will move with the same velocity. Nothing will happen. But if the cycle is at rest, because this is the velocity of the cycle after hitting. This is the velocity. V2 is the velocity of the cycle after hitting. It will fly in the air with 2 times the velocity of the truck. So heavy body is hitting a light body. Case. This is that case. I said something when in the beginning, a little bit of mistake happened. Sorry for that, but the correction is here that your heavy body's velocity, final velocity of the heavy body is same as the initial velocity of the heavy body. Final velocity of the heavy body is same as the initial velocity of the heavy body. जो फाइनल वेलोसिटी है हेवी बॉडी का वो सेम है इनिशियल वेलोसिटी हेवी बॉडी का, परंतु जो साइकिल रेस्ट पे था, द फाइनल वेलोसिटी ऑफ द लाइट बॉडी इज 2 times द वेलोसिटी ऑफ द इनिशियल वेलोसिटी ऑफ द हेवी बॉडी. जो साइकिल की वेलोसिटी थी that it has become 2 times the velocity of the truck which is hit it. So this is that case. Now the next case is case number 3. I think this is fourth case. Case 3, case 4. Yes, we are going for the case 4. We are going for the case 4. The case 4 case is case 4. The case 4 is uh, a light body comes and hits the heavy body. Light body comes and hits a heavy body at rest. Heavy body at rest. That means U2 is at 0. U2 is given to 0. So you will have M1 U1, M2 into 0. That hardly matters. This is going to become M1 V1. Wait a minute. M1 V1 just a minute plus M2 V2. Now this is there. We already know this expression. We did not. This is the situation actually. This is the case. A light body comes and hits a heavy body. That means M1 is very much less than. Wait a minute. Very much less than. Very much less than M2. That means now M1 by M2 earlier as it was M1 by M2 would be less than 1, very much less than 1. Therefore, M1, M2 can be taken to go to 0. M1 by M2. Now, let's go to that same expression of V1 and V2. Let's see what happens. U2 is 0. See what will happen. Let's come to this case. U2 is 0. So, what will happen to V2? U2 is 0. This is gone. We are left only with this portion and we are left only with this portion. That is 2. Let's come down and write down that expression. What we are left with? We are left with your for V2 we are left with, because U2 is 0. U2 is 0. So we have 2m1 U1 upon M2 plus M1. Now M2 is very big. So I'll divide up and down by M2. So 2m1 by M2 and this will be m1. This will be 1 plus m2, m1 by m2, m1 by m2 it will be, and this will be u1. This quantity is 0, so whole thing becomes 0. Now I'll explain you. Now let's come to v1. V1 is, you have u2 is 0, your u2 is 0, so your m1 minus m2, u1 is upon m1 plus m2. Now you divide up and down the numerator and denominator by m2. So you have m1 by m2 minus 1 upon m1 by m2 plus 1, these two brackets, into u1. So this goes to 0, this goes to 0, and this goes to 0. So you have 0 minus 1 and 0 plus 1, and you have u1. So you have minus u1. So the final velocity of the first body is reversed. Let's take an example. देखो मैंने क्या बोला, मैंने ये सिचुएशन लिया था कि मेरा जो, एक ऐसी सिचुएशन लेते हैं, यहाँ पे ट्रक खड़ी है और साइकिल कम्स एंड हिट्स द ट्रक. तो दिस इज योर u1, दिस इज u2 इज 0. आफ्टर दैट साइकिल जब हिट करेगा ट्रक को, उसकी वेलोसिटी बन जाएगी v1, जो कि उसकी ऑपोजिट हो जाएगी, और जो ट्रक है वो वहीं खड़ा रहेगा, उसका कुछ भी नहीं होगा. दैट्स व्हाई फाइनल वेलोसिटी ऑफ v2 इज 0.